The DNA results arrived on a Thursday evening, folded inside a plain white envelope that looked too small to destroy a 22-year marriage. I remember standing at the kitchen counter with my work boots still on, my hands smelling like copper wire and machine oil, while my wife, Linda, sat across from me pretending to scroll through her phone. Our son, Ethan, was at the table, pushing a fork through a plate of food he had barely touched. We had all been waiting for the test because his doctor wanted family medical information before moving forward with more blood work. Nobody in that room expected a family secret.
Who is my biological father?
We expected charts, percentages, maybe some confusing medical language. I opened the envelope. The first page was normal enough. My name, Ethan's name, dates, case number. Then my eyes dropped to the line that turned my entire life into a question. Probability of paternity, 0%. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. I actually laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to understand the sentence. I looked at Ethan, my 20-year-old son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike in the church parking lot, the kid I carried into the ER when he split his chin open at 7, the young man who still called me when his truck made a strange noise. Then I looked at Linda. She was not confused. That was the first thing that broke me. She was scared. She was pale. Her hand froze around her glass of water. But she was not shocked. She looked like a woman who had spent 20 years praying that one particular door would never open, and now it had been kicked off its hinges in front of everyone. Ethan reached for the paper, but I pulled it back without thinking. "Dad," he said, and the word hit me harder than the result. Linda stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. She whispered, "Robert, don't do this here. Don't do this here. Not, that must be wrong. Not, I don't understand. Not, let me see. Just don't do this here." The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. I remember ridiculous details like that because when your life collapses, your mind grabs onto anything that still feels real. I put the paper flat on the table and turned it toward her. "How long have you known?" I asked. Linda pressed her lips together, and for one terrible second, I saw the answer before she spoke. She had known. Maybe not with a lab report. Maybe not with a number printed in black ink. But she had known enough to be afraid. Ethan stood up slowly. His face looked empty, like someone had reached inside him and switched off every light. "Mom," he said. "Who is my father?" Linda covered her mouth, but no answer came. That night did not end with shouting. It did not end with broken dishes or slammed doors. It ended with my wife locking herself in the bedroom, my son driving away without telling either of us where he was going, and me sitting alone at the same kitchen table where I had helped that boy with algebra, college applications, and apology letters after he dented my truck. By midnight, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The DNA test had not taken my son from me, but it had exposed the woman who had used my love, my paycheck, my loyalty, and my name to protect a lie for 20 years. And before it was over, that lie would reach a lawyer's office, a courtroom file, bank records, old hospital documents, and the one man Linda had tried to bury in our past. My name is Robert Miller, and before that envelope came, I would have described my life as ordinary in the best possible way. I was not rich. I was not important. I did not have a corner office or a country club membership. I was an electrician in a small Ohio suburb, the kind of man people called when a breaker kept tripping or a garage light flickered for no reason. I owned one good truck, 2 bad knees, a mortgage that still had a few years left on it, and a toolbox I trusted more than most people. Linda and I got married when we were both too young to understand how heavy vows could become. She was beautiful, sharp, and ambitious in a way I admired. I was steady. That was the word people used for me. Steady Robert. Reliable Robert. The guy who showed up early, stayed late, and never made a scene. When Linda told me she was pregnant, I cried in the parking lot behind the electrical supply store. I still remember sitting in my truck with the ultrasound photo in my hand, staring at a blur that somehow already felt like the center of my world. At the time, I had been offered a better job in Columbus. More money, better benefits, a real chance to move up. But Linda said she did not want to leave her mother, and I did not want our baby born into stress, so I turned it down. I told myself there would be other chances. There were not many, as it turned out, but I never regretted the decision because I thought I was choosing my family. When Ethan was born, he was tiny and furious, with a red face and fists clenched like he had arrived ready to argue with the world. The nurse put him in my arms, and something inside me settled forever. I was his father. No paperwork, no ceremony, no speech could have made it more real than that moment. I worked hard because that was the only way I knew how to love people. I took night calls so Linda could stay home during Ethan's first year. I fixed old appliances instead of buying new ones. I packed lunch in the same dented cooler for 15 years. When Ethan wanted to play baseball, I coached even though I barely knew the rules. When he wanted a guitar, I wired 3 basements on weekends to pay for it. When he crashed his first car into a mailbox, I yelled for 5 minutes, then stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him fix the bumper because I could not stand seeing him ashamed. Our house was not special to anyone else, but it was sacred to me. A 2-story place with faded blue siding, a maple tree in the front yard, and a back porch I built myself. Every nail in that porch carried a memory. Ethan's height marks were still penciled inside the pantry door. His old baseball glove was in the garage. His graduation photo hung in the hallway beside a picture of my father, who died before Ethan was born. I thought I had built something honest. That is the part people misunderstand when they hear stories like mine. They think the DNA test is the whole wound. It is not. Biology matters, but what shattered me was not just that Ethan did not share my blood. It was realizing that every sacrifice I had made had been placed inside a story someone else had written without my consent. If you have ever known a father, mother, grandparent, or anyone who quietly gave up pieces of their own life so someone else could have a better one, you already understand why this kind of betrayal cuts so deep. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the people who carry the most pain are the ones who speak the least. For 20 years, I believed my family was imperfect but real. Then one medical test told me the love was real, the memories were real, the sacrifices were real, but the foundation underneath them had been rigged from the beginning. And the worst part was that Linda did not act like a woman discovering the truth. She acted like a woman caught hiding it. The morning after the DNA results, I found Linda in the living room already dressed for work, even though it was barely 6. She was moving too quickly, opening drawers, closing cabinets, gathering papers from the little desk near the window where we kept bills and insurance documents. When she saw me standing in the doorway, she stopped with a folder pressed against her chest. "We need to talk," I said. She looked exhausted, but not guilty enough. That made something cold move through me. "There's nothing to talk about while you're acting like this," she said. "Acting like what?" "Like a piece of paper cancels 20 years.
Hier.
A piece of paper didn't cancel anything. You did." Her face hardened. "You are still Ethan's father." "I know that." "Then why are you doing this?" The question was so twisted I almost did not know how to answer. Somehow, in less than 12 hours, Linda had turned herself into the protector of the family and me into the man threatening it. She spoke like my need for the truth was selfish, like my pain was an inconvenience, like the real betrayal would be asking her to explain. I asked her the same question from the night before. "How long have you known?" She looked away. That silence was worse than any confession. "Who is he?" I asked. "Robert, please." "Who is Ethan's biological father?" Whoever he was, whatever he had done, whatever role he played in this, Linda's first instinct was to protect the secret, not the husband standing in front of her. Then she said the sentence that changed the way I saw her forever. "A real father wouldn't need a DNA test." It was a cruel thing to say because she knew exactly where to aim. She knew I loved Ethan. She knew I had built my life around being his father. She used that love like a leash, trying to pull me away from the truth. I stepped back before I said something I could not take back. Later that day, I went to the bank to move some money into a separate account, not to punish her, but because my instincts were finally awake. The teller printed the recent activity, and there it was, 3 withdrawals from our joint savings account over the previous 5 weeks. Not huge enough to trigger alarms. Not small enough to ignore. $8,000 total, moved in pieces. When I asked Linda about it that night, she said it was for household expenses. But our household expenses were paid. Paid them. I had always paid them. Then I remembered something else. 2 months earlier, Linda had pushed me to update my will. She said it was responsible. She said we were getting older. She said Ethan was an adult now and we needed to make sure the house, my life insurance, and my retirement account would be handled smoothly if anything happened to me. I had not signed the new papers yet because the attorney had asked me to review them carefully. At the time, I thought I was being lazy. Now I went to the desk, pulled out the draft, and read it line by line. Most of it looked normal until I reached the section naming Linda as the controlling party over assets placed for Ethan's benefit if I became incapacitated or died. That might not have alarmed me before. She was my wife. Ethan was my son. But now, after the DNA test, the withdrawals, and her refusal to answer basic questions, the language felt different. Felt like a net I had almost walked into. Ethan came home late that evening. His eyes were red. He had been sitting in his truck near the reservoir, he said, trying to remember if his whole childhood felt different now. I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to say nothing had changed. But I had promised myself I would not build another lie on top of Linda's. So I told him the truth as gently as I could. You are my son because I raised you, but we both deserve to know what happened. He nodded, but he looked toward the hallway where his mother had disappeared. She won't tell me, he said. She said you're trying to turn me against her. That was the second betrayal. Linda had not only lied to me, she had started fighting for control of Ethan's emotions before I even had a chance to breathe. Later, after the house was quiet, I went to the garage because I needed space. I moved a stack of Christmas decorations to reach an old storage bin, looking for a file box where I kept tax records. Instead, behind the bin, I found a shoebox sealed with packing tape. It had Linda's handwriting on the lid. Old receipts. I almost put it back. Then I noticed the tape had been wrapped around it like someone wanted to make sure it stayed closed. Inside were photographs, folded notes, and a birthday card with no envelope. The photos showed Linda in her 20s, smiling beside a man I had not seen in almost 20 years. Mark Reynolds, my former friend, the man who vanished from our lives right after Ethan was born. I did not confront Linda with the shoebox. That may have been the smartest decision I made during the entire ordeal. The old Robert would have walked straight into the bedroom, dumped the photos on the bed, and demanded answers. But the old Robert still believed Linda would eventually do the decent thing if I gave her enough chances. The man holding those photos at 1 in the morning understood something different. People who hide the truth for 20 years do not surrender it because you ask nicely. They surrender it when the evidence leaves them nowhere to stand. So I started documenting everything. I photographed the DNA report, the bank withdrawals, the unsigned will draft, and every item inside the shoebox. There were pictures from a summer cookout I barely remembered, Linda and Mark standing too close near our old apartment building. There were notes with no dates, just phrases that made my stomach turn. I miss you when he's working nights. I wish things were different. Don't call the house. One card stopped me cold. It was a plain blue card with a handwritten message inside. He looks more like me every year. I'm sorry I'm not brave enough. No signature. But I knew Mark's handwriting. He had been my friend since trade school. We had borrowed each other's tools, watched football together, helped each other move furniture. He was at my wedding. He shook my hand at the hospital after Ethan was born and told me I was lucky. Then, within 2 months, he moved to Kentucky for a job nobody could verify, stopped returning calls, and faded out of our life so cleanly I once felt guilty for not trying harder to keep the friendship. Now I wondered if his disappearance had been an escape. The next morning, I called a family attorney named Helen Brooks. A contractor I knew had used her during a nasty divorce, and he told me she was calm in a way that made dishonest people nervous. Her office was downtown above a title company. I sat across from her with a folder on my lap and felt embarrassed before I even spoke. Men like me are not taught how to explain that their family might have been a fraud. We know how to fix outlets, patch drywall, change tires, and carry heavy things. We do not know how to sit in a leather chair and say our wife may have lied about the paternity of our son for 2 decades. Helen did not flinch. She read the DNA report. She read the draft will. She looked through the bank records and the photos. Then she put everything down and said, "Do not confront her again without a plan." I asked if I could get back the money I had spent raising Ethan. She looked at me carefully. "Is that what you want?" The question hurt because the answer was no. I did not want to turn Ethan into a bill. I did not want to calculate little league fees, braces, school clothes, doctor visits, groceries, Christmas gifts, college deposits, and every hour of overtime like damages on an invoice. That would have punished him for a lie he did not tell. "I want the truth," I said, "and I don't want her using my love for him to take everything else from me." Helen nodded. "Then we protect your assets, preserve evidence, and establish a timeline." That became our first goal. She told me not to move large sums of money without legal advice, not to threaten Linda, not to call Mark in anger, not to post anything online, not to let anyone bait me into looking unstable. She said the truth mattered, but the way I handled the truth would matter just as much if this turned into divorce, civil claims, or a dispute over marital assets. So I built a timeline. Linda's pregnancy, my work schedule back then, Mark's visits, the weeks I spent on night shifts at a hospital renovation project, Ethan's birth, Mark's sudden move, the anonymous birthday gifts that showed up when Ethan was little, the times Linda became strangely emotional whenever Ethan asked about family resemblance, the bank withdrawals, the will draft, the medical test. Helen requested financial records through proper channels. She also suggested I contact the hospital for whatever records I was legally allowed to access from Ethan's birth, especially documents naming emergency contacts or visitors. I did not expect much. 20 years is a long time. But old systems are strange, and sometimes the thing people think has disappeared is simply sitting in a scanned archive under the wrong label. A week later, I received a partial copy of the birth paperwork. Most of it was routine. Linda's name, my name, Ethan's birth weight, insurance information. But one page had a note line that made Helen lean forward when I brought it to her office. Emergency contact originally listed as Mark R. Corrected to Robert M. The correction had been initialed by hospital staff, not by me. I remembered being at that hospital. I remembered signing forms, holding Linda's hand, sleeping in a chair that folded my spine in half. I did not remember seeing Mark's name anywhere because no one had shown me. Helen's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "This does not prove everything," she said, "but it proves someone had reason to write his name down." At home, Ethan and I began talking more. Not perfectly. Some conversations ended with both of us staring at the floor. He was angry at Linda, angry at me for needing answers, angry at himself for caring what the test said. I told him every time that my love for him was not up for debate. But I also told him I would not pretend the lie was harmless. One night he asked me, "Would you have stayed if you knew?" I could not answer quickly. A dishonest answer would have been easier, but he deserved better. "I don't know what I would have done about your mother," I said, "but I know I would have loved you." That was the truth. Maybe not clean, maybe not simple, but real. Then Helen called me 2 days later with the kind of voice lawyers use when they have found something ugly. She had located an old insurance application connected to a policy Linda purchased shortly after Ethan was born. It included a handwritten internal note from the agent referencing possible biological father contact, Mark Reynolds. I sat in my truck outside a job site with the phone pressed to my ear, watching rain slide down the windshield. Helen said, "Robert, this may go beyond an affair. We need to look at whether there was long-term financial concealment." That was the moment I understood the secret had not merely survived 20 years. It had been managed. The first email came from an old account Linda had forgotten existed. Helen found it because one of the bank transfers led to a payment service connected to Linda's maiden name. That led to an email address she had used before we were married. I did not hack anything. I did not break into her accounts. During the early stage of the divorce filing, Helen requested financial disclosures and communications related to transfers, estate planning, and third-party support. Linda's attorney turned over more than she probably expected, and buried in the mess were old archived messages. Most were boring. Store receipts, church announcements, school newsletters. Then there was Mark. The messages began before Ethan was born and continued afterward in scattered bursts. Some were emotional. Some were practical. Some were so cold I had to read them twice. In one message, Linda wrote, "Robert will be a better father than you. He already loves this baby. If you stay quiet, everyone gets what they need." Mark replied, "What if he finds out?" Linda wrote back, "He won't. He trusts me." I had to stand up when I read that line. He trusts me. Those 3 words carried the full weight of 20 years. Every overnight shift, every birthday party, every time I believed her when she said I was overthinking something, every time I apologized first because I thought peace mattered more than pride. My trust had not been respected. It had been used as cover. The emails also showed that Mark had sent Linda money several times over the years. Not regular child support. Nothing that looked responsible or honest. Just private transfers hidden under vague descriptions. Gift, personal help, reimbursement. When Helen compared the dates, some of those transfers happened right before Linda deposited money into accounts I did not know existed. That changed everything. Until then, Linda could have tried to frame the past as one terrible mistake, one affair, one uncertainty she was too afraid to face. But the emails and transfers told a different story. She had known Mark might be Ethan's biological father. Mark had known too. They had both chosen silence because silence benefited them. I raised the child. I paid the mortgage. I carried the insurance. I built the college fund. I signed the school forms. I sat up through fevers and panic attacks and teenage heartbreaks. Mark sent secret money when guilt got too loud, then went back to his own life. Linda took both, my full devotion and Mark's hidden payments. The second legal problem was the will. Helen brought in an estate attorney to review the draft Linda had pushed me to sign. On the surface, it looked like standard family planning. But once the paternity issue and hidden transfers came into view, certain clauses became suspicious. The document gave Linda broad control over assets intended for Ethan if I died or became incapacitated. It also gave her authority to manage certain accounts with minimal oversight. Because I worked in a dangerous trade that mattered. Electricians get hurt. Falls happen. Bad wiring happens. One mistake in a wet basement or a commercial panel can change a life. Linda knew that. She had watched me come home with burns, cuts, and one shoulder injury that took months to heal. Helen was careful. She did not accuse Linda of planning harm. Neither did I. But the pattern was impossible to ignore. Linda had hidden Ethan's paternity, hidden contact with Mark, hidden money, and then tried to increase her control over my assets while I still believed every decision was being made inside an honest marriage. Then Ethan found his own piece of the puzzle. He had been going through old messages and social media accounts, trying to understand who Mark Reynolds was. One night he called me and asked if I knew his mother had blocked someone from contacting him when he turned 18. I did not. Ethan had found message requests from an account connected to Mark. The earliest one said, "You deserve to know some things. Your mother asked me not to contact you, but you're an adult now." Linda had blocked him, not to protect Ethan from confusion when he was a child. He had been 18. She blocked him to protect herself from exposure. For a moment, I felt a strange sympathy for Ethan that was separate from my own pain. He had not just lost certainty about his father. He had lost trust in his mother's version of his entire life. The legal turning point came when Mark made a mistake. He showed up at my house. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the garage sorting tools because keeping my hands busy was the only thing that kept me from drowning in my thoughts. A black SUV pulled into the driveway, and a man stepped out wearing expensive jeans, clean boots, and the uncomfortable confidence of someone who had rehearsed a speech in the mirror. Mark Reynolds had aged, but not enough. Same jaw, same narrow eyes, same way of looking around like he was measuring exits. I had not seen him in person since Ethan was a baby. He said my name like we were old friends meeting at a reunion. "Robert." I wiped my hands on a rag. "You need to leave." He glanced toward the house. I just want to keep this from getting uglier. That sentence told me he had not come to apologize. He had come to manage damage. I remembered Helen's advice. Do not threaten. Do not shout. Do not be alone with someone who wants to twist your reaction. So I stayed in the open garage, where my security camera covered the driveway, and I tapped the recorder app on my phone before sliding it into my shirt pocket. Ohio law allowed one-party consent recording, and Helen had already told me that if someone came onto my property to discuss the dispute, I could protect myself. Mark lowered his voice. Dragging this into court helps nobody, he said. Ethan gets hurt. Linda gets hurt. You look bitter. I look like the bad guy. Everyone loses. You knew? I asked. He looked away. Did you know Ethan might be yours? He sighed like I was being unreasonable. We suspected. The word we landed like a hammer. We, not Linda, not Mark, both. And you left me to raise him? Mark's face tightened. You wanted a family. Linda wanted stability. I wasn't ready. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth was so ugly it became absurd. You weren't ready, I said. So I paid the price. He stepped closer. Listen to me. If this goes public, your son will hate you for destroying his mother. That was when I knew he was just like Linda. They both believed my love for Ethan could be used to silence me. I looked him dead in the eye and said, my son will hear the truth. Not your version. Not Linda's version. The truth. Mark's voice dropped. You don't want a war with people who know your weaknesses. The old me might have flinched. The new me just looked toward the little black camera mounted above the garage. You picked the wrong driveway to threaten me in, I said. His face changed. For the first time since he arrived, Mark looked afraid. Helen filed the first motion the following week. It was not dramatic in the way people imagine from movies. No shouting in court. No surprise witness bursting through the doors. Real legal consequences start quietly, with stamped pages, case numbers, certified letters, and deadlines that make liars run out of room. The demand letter went to Linda and Mark. It required preservation of all communications, disclosure of financial transfers, and a halt to any movement of marital assets outside normal household expenses. It also put Linda on notice that the will draft, hidden accounts, and paternity concealment were now part of a broader dispute over financial deception. Linda's reaction was immediate panic. She called me 13 times in one afternoon. I did not answer. Helen told me to keep communication in writing, so I texted one sentence. Please direct legal matters through counsel. Linda replied with paragraphs. She said I was humiliating her. She said I was traumatizing Ethan. She said I was letting a lawyer poison me. She said marriage meant forgiveness. Then, when guilt did not work, she switched to anger. You will lose him if you keep going. I screenshotted everything. Mark hired an attorney too, which told me he understood the situation was no longer emotional. It was evidence. The first formal meeting happened in a conference room with beige walls and bad coffee. Linda sat across from me with her attorney beside her. Mark sat at the far end of the table, trying to look detached, like he was only there because other people had dragged him into old drama. Helen placed the timeline on the table. Dates, emails, transfers, hospital note, insurance application, draft will, bank withdrawals, Mark's recorded driveway conversation. One by one, the story Linda had controlled for 20 years stopped being a story and became a record. Her attorney tried to argue that paternity did not change my role as Ethan's father. Helen agreed immediately. Mr. Miller is not denying his emotional or parental relationship with Ethan, she said. He is alleging that his spouse concealed material facts while making financial decisions that benefited her and deprived him of informed consent. That phrase stayed with me. Informed consent. I had consented to marriage, fatherhood, mortgages, insurance, college savings, estate planning, and years of financial sacrifice. But I had consented inside a false reality Linda created and maintained. When Mark's attorney suggested the old emails were taken out of context, Helen played the driveway recording. Mark's voice filled the room. We suspected. You wanted a family. I wasn't ready. If this goes public, your son will hate you. Linda stared down at the table. Mark's jaw clenched. His attorney stopped writing. That was the moment the room changed. Before that, they could pretend this was a painful misunderstanding. After that, they were explaining a conspiracy of silence. Ethan asked to attend one session. I told him he did not have to. I told him none of this was his burden. But he said he was tired of learning about his own life from documents. He walked into that office taller than I remembered, wearing the same jacket I had bought him for his first internship. He sat beside me, not between me and Linda. That small choice broke something in her face. Linda started crying before anyone asked her a question. She told Ethan she had been scared. She said she thought Robert would leave. She said she thought Mark would ruin everything. She said she only wanted Ethan to have a stable home. Ethan listened quietly. Then he said, "You keep saying you did it for me. But you lied to me too." Linda reached for his hand. He pulled it back. Mark tried to speak next. He said he had regretted staying away. He said he had thought about Ethan every birthday. He said he had carried guilt. Ethan looked at him with an expression I had never seen before. It was not rage. It was judgment. "You knew there was a chance I was your son," Ethan said. "And you let another man do everything because it was easier for you." Mark had no answer. Then Ethan turned to me. "I don't know what DNA makes him," he said. "But you're my dad." I had promised myself I would not cry in that room. I failed. The legal process continued for months. Financial disclosures revealed more hidden transfers. Linda had maintained a separate account funded partly by Mark's money and partly by withdrawals disguised as household spending. It was not enough to make her rich, but it was enough to prove intent. She had built an escape pocket while I built a family. The court issued temporary orders restricting movement of marital funds. The unsigned will was discarded. My estate documents were rewritten under independent counsel. Linda lost the ability to access certain accounts without review. Mark was compelled to provide records of his transfers and communications. Nobody went to prison. This was not that kind of story. But Linda's power came from secrecy, and the legal process stripped secrecy away piece by piece. The woman who once told me a real father would not need a DNA test now had to answer questions under oath. And the man who said he was not ready to be responsible finally learned that responsibility can wait 20 years and still find your address. By the time the divorce was finalized, I no longer wanted revenge. That surprised me. In the beginning, I thought justice would feel like watching Linda lose everything. I thought I needed a dramatic confession, a public apology, maybe some perfect moment where everyone understood exactly what she had done to me. But after months of lawyers, records, sleepless nights, and painful conversations with Ethan, I realized revenge would only keep me tied to the lie longer. What I wanted was clean paper, a clean divorce decree, clean estate documents, clean bank accounts, clean boundaries, a life where nobody could use my love as a weapon against me again. Linda did not walk away empty, but she walked away exposed. The court considered her hidden financial activity during the asset division. She had to account for the withdrawals and undisclosed transfers. Some funds were credited back into the marital estate. She lost control over anything connected to my inheritance planning, insurance decisions, and future assets. Her reputation inside our family never recovered, not because I destroyed it, but because the truth finally had witnesses. Mark tried once to build a relationship with Ethan. He sent a long email full of regret, explanations, and carefully chosen words about lost time. Ethan showed it to me not because he needed permission, but because he wanted me to know there would be no secret relationship behind my back. He eventually replied with 3 sentences. "You may be my biological father. Robert is my dad. Please do not contact me again unless I ask." I did not celebrate when I read that. I just sat on the back porch for a long time, looking at the yard where Ethan had once chased fireflies in pajamas, and I let myself breathe. The strangest thing about losing the life you thought you had is that some parts remain. The pantry door still had Ethan's height marks. The garage still had his old baseball glove. My truck still had the tiny scratch from the mailbox he hit at 16. None of that disappeared because of a lab result. DNA could tell us where his blood came from, but it could not rewrite who showed up. I changed my will. That was important. Not because I wanted to punish Ethan, but because I wanted every document in my life to tell the truth. I left him what I wanted him to have, directly, clearly, protected from Linda's control. I wrote a letter to go with it, explaining that fatherhood was never just biology to me, but trust mattered, and no one had the right to build someone else's life on a lie. Ethan and I are still healing. Some days are easy. Some days he gets quiet, and I know he is thinking about the version of his childhood that no longer feels simple. Sometimes I catch myself looking at old photos and wondering what Linda was thinking when the picture was taken. Was she happy? Was she afraid? Was she calculating? I may never know, but I know this. I did not lose my son. I lost a marriage that had been dishonest from the start. I lost the illusion that loyalty will always be returned. I lost the comfort of believing that good people cannot be used by the ones they love. And in exchange, I gained the truth. I gained boundaries. I gained the chance to rebuild my life without someone else holding a secret over it. People sometimes ask whether I regret taking the DNA test. I do not. The test did not create the betrayal. It revealed it. There is a difference. A smoke alarm does not start the fire. It wakes you up before the whole house burns down. So if there is one thing I learned, it is this: love is powerful, but love without truth becomes a trap. Being calm is not weakness. Asking for evidence is not cruelty. Protecting yourself legally does not mean you stopped caring. It means you finally understood that your heart and your rights both deserve protection. I raised Ethan for 20 years because I loved him. Linda lied for 20 years because she feared consequences. Mark stayed away for 20 years because responsibility was inconvenient. And when the truth finally came, it did not erase the father I had been. It only revealed the people who had counted on me, never asking questions. If this story made you think about family, loyalty, or the difference between blood and responsibility, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, share this video, save it for later, and subscribe for more emotional drama stories where the truth comes out, the evidence matters, and the people who thought they could hide forever finally see what they did.